Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm 30 years old. I'm a native of Los Angeles, California. I work part-time as a administrator at a local church and part-time as an editor for an online publication.
I'm Jason CHAO. I'm 31 years old, Taiwanese American, native of Texas, and I am a filmmaker and a youth pastor.
I think for me, especially with the Judge Kavanaugh confirmation that happened this weekend, and just listening to the different opinions of the people that I interact with, I think, yeah, I agree that there is danger to our democracy, and I think so. This is something that the authors didn't mention that I thought of was just I think it's a lot, or it's a lack of engagement and a kind of a disconnect. Now I don't know like historically how active um, people have been. Like generally in elections, young people don't turn out as much anyway. A lot of the peers that I have are Asian American, which as a group tend not to vote a lot anyway because we don't have a history of our family voting or things like that. Also, being from a state that is consistently blue, I think just makes people just be like, oh, like what's the point of voting when this is what's going to happen anyway. But I do think that um, having a president and a presidency and a political system with both parties that are very polarized and also look polarized, not just are, but also just seem very polarized. I think it's very easy for people to disengage and be like, I don't care, and I don't care to know.
Yeah, I think it for me, like the notion that American democracy is like under peril and like eroding. I feel like in actuality, the arguments that were being laid out, to me, the conclusion is this is American democracy. Like, this is what American democracy was, right? Like, from the very beginning, right, with Jefferson on one side and like Adams and Hamilton on the other side, like, they were extremists and they were fighting and they were like not, they were like at each other's throats, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even they bring up Huey Long and FDR, but I think about like Andrew Jackson. It always happens. I think it's just that because we were coming out of a season where it wasn't as overt, and we're like, oh my gosh, like these people are mean to each other, like they discredit each other, they call each other like morons and idiots, and like, no, that's pretty much how it's always been, right? And even the politicization of the Supreme Court, I'm like, any dive into Supreme Court history is it's always been politicized. It's always this,
there's been moments,
right? There's always been moment because it's never like never a president's like, oh, I get to put a Supreme Court justice. Let's just pick the most moderate person I can find. You know, it's usually always going to be that. So I do think, for me, like it is a reminder that this is the way it's supposed to work. Like it's supposed to be people fighting each other and contentious with each other, and that is what makes that. Because I think the argument that resonated most with me is that when in these other countries, in Turkey and Russia, the fact that from the very beginning these authoritarians were able to shut down the debate, right? Like in Russia especially. So I do feel like the erosion of democracy would come if it was like, if Trump could pass libel laws and like shut down all these, papers and whatever, then that's a different story. But the fact that he can tweet racist and obscene things and appoint less than stellar character judges,
the best people,
right? Like, no, that's exactly how it's just, and the pushback and what I hope, right, is actually American democracy at work, is people on the other side getting angry and marching and fighting and not just and voting and also like
pushing policy.
And I feel like it's like football, right? Where football, you are always bending the rules in your favor, and then the other team has to bend the rules in their favor, and then back and forth.
But don't you feel like it goes to, then that'll go to a certain point where like they've bent the rules too far? Like for example, Barack Obama, because the Republican Senate wouldn't confirm any of his judges, they said that you only need a majority to appoint federal judges, not the Supreme Court, but just federal judges. And then the Republicans turned around and said, "Oh, well, you ruined that rule, so now the Supreme Court justices you only need 51." That's how Brett Kavanaugh.
So I don't think it's I don't think that that's an erosion of democracy, because democracy is you vote for who you want, right? And if anything, I think Trump is the pinnacle of democracy. It's like he just went straight to the voters and was like, you want a racist, braggadocious, like kind of a-hole, right? Like, here I am. You can vote for me. You don't need any of these guys that are pretending to be better, right? You can just vote for me. I think for anything like for me, like that is the natural erosion of a state just getting bigger and bigger. Like, to me, that's always the problem, right? Like with Rome, it was like by the time it was done, you had law. Like, to be a lawyer, you had to study for like 50 years just to know all the laws that were written. I think the problem is the system keeps building upon itself.
So I guess my question is, or I would just ask, like, so then do you think that American democracy is the same, is better, or is worse in terms of its health? And to what degree?
So I feel like then the part of the question is, right, like, because to me, reading the question is democracy itself. Democracy itself is the same as it's always been.
Okay.
The health of the state that functions in this democracy has eroded, but not necessarily it's not because, we happen to elect an authoritarian this time. I feel like we've elected authoritarians before. Like, people want despots. Like, that's the nature. That's why so many people in constitutional monarchies hated democracies, because they're like, at least with a monarchy, we can try to control this guy. You're going to elect a despot because that's what people want.
So you're saying, okay, so I'm trying to, I say it's a little worse. So he says it's the same. I say it's a little worse. In summary. Cool. Executive power becomes more powerful when the Senate and when Congress is weakened. Right? Like, if Congress passed laws that said this is the scope of this law and it's very clear, there's very little that there's much less the executive branch can do about things like that. Like, for example, with Robert Mueller right now and his investigation, if the Senate and House passed a rule that said the president cannot dissolve this committee without the express consent of whatever, I don't know, something like, then that would limit it. But I think, if anything, more than Trump's authoritarianism or his perceived authoritarianism, I think it's the fact that all of Congress plus the presidency is ruled by a Republican. The Republicans were saying the same thing when it was Barack Obama's first 2 years.
But I don't think it's just that they're all Republican; it's that they've bent over backwards for Trump. Because I think to say, "Oh man, a powerful, privileged white man is abusing power." Surprise, right? Like, no. I think everybody is going to try to push the limits of their power when they're in that position. So to me, the surprising thing is that the Senate and Congress aren't also trying to push their power. Like, that's what makes no sense to me, right? Where it's like, you have power, like, because if they were like, President Trump, we're in charge of making laws, we want to do this, so you can sign this or sign nothing, right?
They've done some of that with the budgets. I mean, he hasn't gotten his wall funded yet.
True, right? So I think, but I feel like it's at least, he uses executive power, but every president has. That's what they're supposed to do. But they're supposed to be somebody who's trying to use power against him. In some form, yes. So because he won the primaries first. And in the primaries, you don't need the establishment as much, because at the end of the day, you just need votes, right? Like,
right. Like the
you
article,
don't have the votes.
The article talked about the primaries. It used to be a big deal. It used to be like just like backroom deals,
right?
Yeah, but now that primaries have become a show,
right? But once he did win the Republican National Convention, right?
Just went right behind.
Yeah, like because they had to, because what else are they gonna do, right? So I do think there was a lot where he won a good number of votes, enough to get him in, and then people are like, crap, we have to get him the rest of the votes, so.
Yeah, and I think also for some of the Republican Party leaders, I think when they saw how popular Trump was and how fired up they got certain wings of the Republican Party, they were like, maybe this is good. Like, if many other long-term Republicans had said the things that Trump had said, like their Mexicans are like the rapists, right? Or like things like that, like they would have been kicked out. But because Trump's like, I'm not a politician, I don't have to be politically correct. I think when they saw the energy that brought, the Republican Party, some of them liked that and they didn't mobilize. They could have done so much if they didn't want him to be the nominee.
But I think a part of that too is built off of the last like 20 years from Newt Gingrich to like the politicization of primaries, where you have enough people now that have been conditioned to just vote for a letter. Like they don't think about the person, they don't think about the policies, they see the letter and they think this is right. And that is different, right? But
not necessarily. They used to give out, like, unions used to have like roles where they're just, this is like how you do it. But
and then for me it's like, in terms of the question of like, was he able to go around the traditional structures? I don't know so much. He used, like, I think the thing is he knew where America was, and he just wanted to get the votes. Yeah. So it wasn't like, this is what I want to do. It was, what do I have to do to get the votes? Yeah. And he leveraged Twitter. He leveraged 24 hours. He knew what Fox News was, what it could do. Even CNN. Like, he goaded CNN. He still goads CNN, right? Like, all the time. But in that way, it's like when JFK debated Nixon, and JFK was like, I should shave and get a haircut. And Nixon was like, why? Like, we're on television. People will just see it. And JFK is like, no, I understand the medium. I understand where the technology is. So in that way, I feel like, yes, Trump has done that much more effectively than even Obama did.
Well, for
it's a
me,
legitimate concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the media, because the freedom of the press is written into the Constitution, it's definitely not as big of a fear for me. It is concerning that people don't trust the news anymore. Although there's just studies, where for some people it depends on the medium. I mean, it is true that the media does sensationalize things, and things do like. They do things wrong, but I think overall, the media is doing fine. Like, the fact that Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, LA Times just got bought by Patrick Soon-Ching something.
Is that fine?
No, fine as in like.
That's how it is.
No, that's how it's always been. They've always been owned by a family. The New York Times is owned like by its own corporation. I don't know, but and then so yeah, I do think that yes, the media could have its reputation up, but people still watch the news. People, like, especially local news, and
although with Sinclair,
although that didn't go through, you know that, right?
Like, I know, but it's the evil giant didn't get bigger.
But still,
an evil giant.
Okay, the fact that it couldn't get approved by a Trump appointed FCC commission, it's a big deal. So like, it is worrying, but I also think that Trump shoots himself in the foot enough where people are like, oh yeah, Trump, like. You say bash the media, but we know you're not completely. Even people who support him knows that he's like bending the truth and moving the truth. So for me, like I think like people will be like, we distrust both of you. Like I don't think Trump has. Like yes, he's vilified the media, and I do think it's not great, but I'm not that worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like you pick up a newspaper from like 1890.
Those are all political.
That was like we called it yellow journalism because it was like you pee on it, right? Like
I don't think so.
I don't know, but it's like we literally had a term for journalism that was like completely sensational,
made up,
false, right? Like
I wonder why it was called yellow journalism.
Like everything, like So I feel like it's not because yes, Trump shoots himself in the foot as much as he does say all these things, like we should do this to the media and do this, it does seem like he is aware enough where he realizes that will backfire on me really quickly. So I think he knows his power is in saying it and not doing it. Like, that is the power that he has, right? So for me, I think right now the question is just with the new media, he also caught it in this period where media wasn't making any money. So they had to just print whatever sells, and Trump, for all of his flaws, knows what sells. So the question is, media outlets, how do they find a way to respond, right? And I do think Washington Post, right, especially with all the Ronan Farrow stuff, is like...
Ronan Farrow's New Yorker.
Oh, New Yorker, right? In many ways, like, that's maybe the counter, right? Where essentially Trump... Because the problem is Trump yells, and then they yell back. And it's almost like... It's like when the bully in school, like, you give them a platform. Whereas, like, for the New Yorker and Ronan Farrow, it's just like... Blah, blah, blah. Look what I found. Look what I found. I think in many ways it's news outlets that are actually going back to the news of like finding things and investigating and publishing them and realizing if we do that, not only can we still sell and be relevant, but then we can actually bring about change instead of just being like, you're stupid. No, you're stupid. No, you're stupid. Really.
Yeah, I think when I think about democracy in America, I think what I realized after the 2016 election is that America is made for white people.
By white people.
Yeah, on the backs of slaves. Right? Like, and I feel like, I think when I was in 2016 was the first time I felt like as an Asian American that I wasn't American. Like that, I don't understand America and America doesn't understand me. And it was a very tough thing to swallow. And I think this Brett Kavanaugh confirmation and just all these things that happened in the past 2 years, and just even seeing from like white friends and other people I know and relatives even, like that they don't see America now as the best version of America. And I think that made me very sad, but also helped me to understand why they were so reactionary, right? There's always jokes about like, this is our punishment for getting like a black president. Like they were so scared and so freaked out, like parts of white America were, that they're willing to go this opposite direction. Maybe, right? Because I think, in 2008, progressives were so excited for, this is the new direction of America, this change, like hope, like all these words. And I think, there's a lot of, I think, soul searching that has to be done with America, and just realizing, if you're saying that America is for everyone, like, do you really mean that? Because now I don't think you do. And if not, just be open about it. Say, America's for white people. And that way we could at least be clear.
Right. And I have felt many of those same things too. I think right now I'm in this place of transition where I'm, again, as I articulate, this is how it has always been. And I think it's funny because what white people felt when Obama was president, which is like, oh, this is not the deal we signed up for, right? Like, and I think they understood the system isn't permanent. Let's change the system in our favor and let's fight for it. And that American democracy has always been the minority fighting for the majority hold, right? Like, even within white people, minorities of white people. Because most white people didn't even own slaves. It was like the slave owners like, oh crap, we want to make sure we keep our slaves. I think in that sense, even, like, there was that time where I was like, oh, am I really American, right? Like, because I'm a minority or whatever. And I feel like I'm trying to come into this place where I'm like, this is what being American is. I'm going to fight for what I want, right? Like, I'm going to fight for the to make the system the way that we want it to be.
To make America great.
To make America
greater.
greater againer. Right? Like,
or greater for the first time.
So I think like even this idea of American democracy, like, this is the system we have. And at what I hope that I understand, what other people understand is like, yes, we have the field is tilted against us. But it's not tilted all the way, right?
Yes, we can.
Like, Yeah, but instead of hope, it's like we can fight back from like 20 points down. Like we can, we have a chance if we work at it and if we want it and if we do it, right? And yeah, that I think we have to be an acknowledgement of our entitlement, right? To say like these things aren't gonna just happen because humanity is gonna get better. Like these things are gonna happen because the few fight for it for the sake of many. But even like what you're saying, like for white people to say like, oh, this isn't a country for everyone, right? I think progressives, like liberals, have to say that too. Like this is not a country for
only white people.
No, but even like, but to be able to say honestly, right? Which I feel like they weren't able to say and still aren't able to say. Like if you're white and you grew up in like a rural place where you could work a factory job and you don't want to move and you don't want to learn and you don't want welfare and to accept that, this is not a country for you anymore, right? Like you have, like somebody has to change. And I feel like that's part of like, for the white conservative, like they're like, you should change. And they're very easy to say like, get out, right? But I think for progressives, it has to be said like, hopefully not get out, but like, listen, things are going to change, right?
Make some room.
Yeah, like this is not the country you want it to be anymore. And I feel like that's where maybe those voices are getting louder. I think so, but
I don't know. Ask me in 2 years.
In 10, when they redistrict.
2020 is the census.
All right. Usually you do at the beginning.